Today we're going to be ranking every single Premier League manager, and the reason why I want to do this now is because since the end of last season, Liverpool, Chelsea, Brighton and West Ham have all changed their managers. You've got the three newly promoted managers with Leicester City, Ipswich Town and Southampton. Plus Leicester have got a new manager from the one they got promoted with. So I think today is the perfect time to talk about all the Premier League managers and where I think they are in their careers. And we're going to bring out the trusty old tier list to help us out ranking all the managers. Top ones are going to go in elite, the next one is level above, solid Prem manager, needs a good season, and last chance saloon. And we're going to start off by talking about Wolverhampton Wanderers manager Gary O'Neill, because who doesn't love Gary O'Neill? 2 seasons ago, he took over the job from Bournemouth 3 games into the new season with no transfer window, and after Scott Parker, the previous manager, lost 9-0 away to Liverpool. And not only did he get a feel-good factor around the club, he also kept them promoted in the Premier League. Got what would arguably, you could say, harshly sacked at the end of the season, but after what we saw with Iraola, I don't think you can really say that because, Bournemouth had a way they wanted to go. So what he ended up doing, he ended up going to Wolverhampton Wanderers 4 days before the start of the Premier League season because Julian Lopetegui decided he didn't want to be the manager anymore. And not only did he keep them in the Premier League, but actually did really well at spells, having one of the best front threes in the entire league with Hwang, Cunha and Neto. So I think Gary O'Neill has done a fantastic job, especially considering the circumstances that he's had. And for me, this is quite an easy one. He is definitely a solid Premier League manager. He's very young still, and he's only at the start of his manager career, so he's got time to go levels above. But for me, I think for now, solid Prem manager. Next up then, who should we go for? Do you know what? Let's go for Mikel Arteta, one of the big boys. And I think with Arteta, if you're an Arsenal fan, you absolutely love him. If you're a rival fan, sometimes it's quite easy to poke fun at him because he hasn't won the Premier League yet. But if you think about where Arsenal were when he took over to where they are now, yes, you can maybe make an argument that they've spent a lot of money. They've been probably overly patient with him, especially in the early on periods. But I think the way he's got his team playing, the style of football, and the points that they're accumulating in recent seasons from 84, which probably isn't, enough to win the Premier League nowadays, especially with Man City. But then they went on again and got 89, and they are so close to winning that Premier League title. They will get there eventually. But I think the job that Arteta has done, I don't think it can be really understated, because now we all expect Arsenal to be in the top 2 of the Premier League, there or thereabouts. We all expect them to go far in the Champions League, at least in the the quarterfinals of the Champions League. So I think it's one where Arteta's done a really good job. And yes, he's only got an FA Cup to show for it, and that was in his very first season, not even his first full season. But I think for me, I think he has to go in elite, because if it wasn't for the fact that it was Pep Guardiola and this incredible Manchester City side who were trying to go for a 5th consecutive Premier League title, I think he would have arguably 1, maybe even 2 Premier League titles under his belt. And for me, do I anyone else at the moment? Probably not. I think in Arteta they trust, and I think rightly so, because for me, he's an elite manager. And now from the top of the table, let's go a little bit further down. Let's go to one of the newly promoted sides, and that's Steve Cooper of Leicester City. Cooper did a wonderful job with England under-18s and under-21s when he was at the helm, and not only that, he then went to Nottingham Forest, did really well in the Championship, got them promoted, and that was a massive achievement considering how long they spent outside of the top flight. He then kept them in the Premier League, and then I think it was quite harshly that he did get let go in about Christmas time of last year. And for me, I like Steve Cooper. I think that sometimes he does get a little bit of stick unnecessarily, because really, what did you expect from Nottingham Forest last year? He was really the face and the front of it all, and I think there was a lot of going on behind the scenes, a lot of PSR issues, a lot of players coming in and out, and he really fronted that really well and really kept the club together. And for me, I really like him, but I do have to ask the question though. I can understand him taking the Leicester job because he wants to be a little bit closer to home. He doesn't want to travel too far, and I think the Leicester job is a good fit for him. But let's say that he gets sacked from Leicester before the end of the season. What's his next job after that? Is he getting a Premier League job after that? And in my opinion, no. And I don't think it's the end for him in the Premier League if he were to get sacked before the end of the season. I just think that he'll probably have to go back down to the Championship and work his way back up into the Premier League and get them promoted. So he definitely needs a good season. I think if he had kept Nottingham Forest in the Premier League and was there for the entirety of last season, then I think definitely solid Prem manager. But I actually think, and potentially this is a bit harsh, that it's the last chance saloon for now, just because if he gets sacked by Leicester before the end of the season, he's not getting a Premier League job again. Who next then? Let's go for Marco Silva for Fulham. Why not? And I think probably immediately put him in the exact place that's perfect for him. Because if you think about Marco Silva and his career he's taken, he started off in the Portuguese league, he then ended up with Sporting, Olympiacos, and then obviously Hull City, Watford, Everton, and Fulham in the Premier League. I think he's been a perfectly good Premier League manager over the years, and now he's going to have his third year at Fulham in the Premier League since they've been newly promoted. I think he has faced some issues with a lot of players leaving, and in my opinion, that he's actually done quite an underrated job of getting Fulham to where they are, and consistently to a place where we just expect them to be about 10 to 15th in mid-table, not really in a relegation fight, and that's all credit to him. I actually did a video about Fulham, you can go check it out now. It's what I'd do if I was Fulham and Marco Silva in terms of the players that are bringing this summer, and I think, the players that he's left, he's had a harder job than, he probably should have done. So for me, Marco Silva is definitely a solid Premier League manager. Now let's talk about Thomas Frank, because I think this is quite an interesting one. And I really like Thomas Frank, considering that the job he's done at Brentford, and Brentford, who we all think in our heads is a solid Premier League club. Really, they've only spent 5 seasons ever in the top flight of English football. 3 of them have been the last 3 seasons consecutively under Thomas Frank, and they're going to embark on the 4th consecutive one now. So the job that he's doing at Brentford, at a club the size of Brentford, no disrespect, is a phenomenal one. And especially last season when Ivan Toney was unavailable because of his suspension, did any of us really bat an eyelid and say Brentford are going to be in a relegation fight? Yes, they probably were a little bit closer than I think everyone expected them to be. But still, the fact that they didn't, and the fact that next season they're going to probably kick on again, I think it's credit to him and credit to Brentford as a whole. But I think Thomas Frank, I need a little bit more from him. I need Brentford to be in the top 10, maybe chasing for Europe, maybe in the attractive style of football. I'm not sure quite what it is. Maybe he needs to leave Brentford. Maybe that's what he needs to do for his own career. But at the moment, I don't see him as a manager as a level above, despite the fact that what he's been doing at Brentford is fantastic. There just needs to be a little bit something more. I can't exactly put my finger on what it is, but yeah, for me at the moment, I think he's just going to have to be a solid Premier League manager. Okay, next let's talk about Enzo Maresca at Chelsea. And this is a little bit of a hard one because obviously he hasn't kicked a ball yet in the Premier League. And where do you rank him? Because obviously, yes, he did a fantastic job with Leicester City last season, getting 97 points, getting them promoted, top of the Championship. But obviously he's left now and he's going to Chelsea, which is a daunting task considering the job that he's got, trying to take over from some of these other previous world-class managers who have failed at Chelsea in the last couple of years under Todd Bowley and Clearlake, and now he's got to put his own vision on when there's expectation. I'm not really sure what to do with Enzo Maresca here, because I'm not ready to put him in a level above just yet. It just doesn't seem right to me. I think he needs to prove himself in the Premier League first before I say out of all these Premier League managers he's a level above. He could definitely be a solid Prem manager, but at the moment we haven't seen it. At the moment, we've only seen him in the Championship, maybe being Pep's number 2. I definitely don't think it's last chance saloon for him, because ultimately going from Leicester getting promoted, he will definitely get other jobs in the Premier League if he weren't to work out at Chelsea. So for me, I think it's just he needs a good season, because if you think about the fact that I think Chelsea have had 6 managers at the moment, or 6 head coaches in charge of Chelsea in the dugout since in the last 2 years since Todd Bowley has taken over. He's now going to be the 7th in the start of the 3rd season. What are the odds he's going to make it to the end of the season? Truthfully, I have no clue at all. I don't know what's going to happen. I hope for his sake and for Chelsea fans' sake, obviously works out. He just looks right and needs a good season, because God, who knows? Absolutely anything could happen with him in Chelsea. So I'm going to leave him there for now. And that was quite a tough one. So let's go for what I think is quite an easy one, which is Sean Dyche. And yeah, obviously he's a solid Premier League manager, isn't he? The job he did at Burnley, getting them promoted and then getting them into Europe, was absolutely outstanding. The fact that, yes, he might have got them relegated for the majority of the season, he did get sacked before it was official. But I think getting Burnley to where they are to now, where, they're yo-yoing in between the Championship and the Premier League, and we all have in our heads that Burnley are a side that are capable of being in the Premier League and doing well. I think that was fantastic. And then also to buck the trend at Everton, to come in halfway through a season, keep the club promoted, but then to make the entirety of next season. And let's be honest, if it wasn't for the 8-point deduction, Everton would be much higher than they were last season. I think they would probably been around 12th. I think they would have been on level on points with Bournemouth and Brighton. And we talk about them as, having a great style of football, great managers at the helm. And I think with Everton, what they have now with Sean Dyche is something that's, it's not the flashiest, it's not the most exciting in terms of the style and the way they play, but it's a side that will graft for you, work incredibly hard, give it all on their pitch. And sometimes that's all they need, and they get results like that. They're a different team to watch, and it's quite nice, if anything, just to watch a team play a different way to everyone else who's playing quite similarly with the ball at their feet, and just seeing Sean Dyche's team just go a bit longer, go a bit more physical, and just a bit of old school. I know it sounds a bit old-fashioned to think like, oh, just kick it long nowadays, but I think it's something just nice, and just to watch something a little bit different. And I think Sean Dyche is a fantastic Premier League manager, and for me, Everton are very lucky to have him, and Sean Dyche definitely a solid Premier League manager. Now let's get a little bit controversial, shall we? Arne Slot. Now this is a difficult one because obviously a bit like Maresca hasn't managed a single game in the Premier League yet, but where is he going to go in this tier list? And if you look at Slot, what he did before he came to Liverpool and the Premier League, obviously in 21-22 he got the Conference League runners-up with Feyenoord. In 22-23 they ended up winning the Eredivisie, and 23-24, which was last season, they won the cup, the domestic cup competition. So he's done all right considering Feyenoord and considering the other teams in the Eredivisie, which are like PSV and Ajax. So he's got good credibility, and he is a manager that could potentially do really well at Liverpool. The thing is, though, after replacing Jurgen Klopp and a side in the Premier League who are third, are Liverpool going to be challenging for the Premier League next season? In my opinion, no. And if they were, then I think, you could definitely say that maybe Slot is in this tier list a level above the rest. But at the moment, realistically, we just really don't know. So even putting him in something like solid Premier League manager is quite hard to do right now. And this is why I want to do this now, before a ball is kicked, because once the football starts, our perceptions might change dramatically. So I just want this as a reference point to come back in a year or maybe halfway through the season and just say, how did we get this right, or how did it go this so wrong? At the moment, I think with Slot, I'm a bit torn, because not only am I thinking about them as a manager, but also the job that they have to do at their club. And I think if you were to get Liverpool in the top 4 next season, then I think, he's a solid Premier League manager. How does he go a level above? I think it's going to be challenging for the Premier League and Champions League. Whether that will happen, we are yet to see it. So I'm going to have to put him in needs a good season, because replacing Jurgen Klopp and the expectation that's going to be there, all rival fans are out there with their knives and the guns just waiting for Liverpool to mess up and for everyone to go after him. And I hope it doesn't happen for him, for Liverpool fans' sake. But for me, I think he needs a good season. Maybe not even a good season, maybe just a solid season where Liverpool just reaffirm themselves, say, we're not challenging yet, but we're going to build towards it, but we're not going to fall off either. So you can also, stay at home with your daggers. So I think Slot for now needs a good season. Oh, I didn't like doing that. So let's just go for a very easy one. Let's go for Pep Guardiola. Let's put him in the lead and let's get it out of the way. And you know what? I'll even put him right at the very front so no one can have any complaints. I mean, the man is just simply insane. 6 Premier League titles, 4 in a row, and now they're trying to go for 5 this season. I mean, the style of football, the amount of points that they get, the Centurion side, they've won the Champions League as well. They've done literally everything. I mean, I think in terms of English football, Pep Guardiola is joined second in terms of league titles overall. I think he's joined on second on 6 with Bob Paisley. I think also George Ramsey of Aston Villa. So, he's really got Sir Alex Ferguson. And if he were to stay for another 8 years, then, you could easily see him maybe equaling Sir Alex Ferguson. But I don't think he will. I think he probably will leave before then. And thank God for all of our sakes, because, at the moment he's just dominating. And with Jurgen Klopp now leaving Liverpool as well, sometimes there was a bit of a debate about who do you prefer. I mean, obviously you can make a debate about Klopp with the finances, and maybe the style of football is a bit more exciting for neutral fans. But yeah, I think undoubtedly now Pep Guardiola is first, and he's also now the only Premier League manager out of all 20 teams who's actually won the Premier League. So none of the other 19 have ever won a Premier League title as a manager. So yeah, it's going to take some stiff competition to displace him, but yeah, Pep Guardiola easily elite. And I think the tier list has come along quite well, but let's go for Nuno Espirito Santo next, because him at Nottingham Forest, I think if you're one of the bookies, and I think I was looking at the odds before I started recording this, he's one of the favourites to be sacked this season, which I think is a little bit harsh, but I can also see where they're coming from as well. He did a really good job initially with Wolves, getting them promoted from the Championship and then keeping them in the Premier League. Not only that, he then went to Spurs, and that Spurs situation there was just abysmal, and it was always going to fail, and I feel really sorry for him about that. But he's come back to Nottingham Forest. He's done okay. I think he played 21 matches last season and he got them 6 wins. So I think it was a points per game of 1.05, which if they maintain that for the entirety of next season, it's going to be about 39 points, which will probably keep him safe. But I think I can understand where people come from saying they think he might get sacked. And if he doesn't make it towards the end of the season, I think very similar to Steve Cooper, I don't think he's going to get another Premier League job, because I think especially with Santo, because he's been around at a couple of Premier League clubs now, he has that perception that he's a little bit tainted. He's not necessarily going to be there for the long haul, which I think is probably a little bit of a misconception and I think a little bit harsh. But I think that's the way that the minds of football fans are thinking nowadays, and especially his style of football isn't the most exciting and everyone wants to be a bit more progressive. So I think if he doesn't make it to the end of the season with Forest, which I think he's more likely than some of the other managers if we're being realistic, then I don't think he gets another Premier League job. So I think it probably is last chance saloon for Nuno in the Premier League. And yeah, I hope it works out for him. But if it doesn't, then I'm not sure we're going to see him in English football again. Then let's talk about Unai Emery, because I'm going to put him there because he's undoubtedly at least a solid Premier League manager. And I think if you were to do that, you'd be incredibly harsh. I think for me, he is comfortably a level above all the other managers below him. Is he elite? And the reason why I ask is he elite is because, yes, obviously he's won league titles, but that was in France with PSG, who are the favourites every single year. He's obviously done a fantastic job early on. Before that, he was obviously at Sevilla, where they won the 3 Europa Leagues back-to-back. He obviously won a Europa League as well with Villarreal. He obviously took the Arsenal job at what was a very difficult time. Did okay, if we're being honest. Got to the Europa League final, lost that out to Chelsea. Got ridiculed for that, but coming back to Aston Villa and taking a side under Steven Gerrard, who were at the very bottom of the league, a chance of being risk of getting relegated, to then taking them comfortably to the upper echelons of the Premier League table, and then the following season, which was last season, taking them into Europe. Is he elite? I think you can make a case that he's not, because he hasn't obviously won a league title in somewhere where he wasn't expecting to do it, or if he does it with Aston Villa, then definitely elite. I think for me, I think he is elite. I think there'll be very few clubs in world football who would be unhappy if they had Unai Emery as a manager. I think I remember when Man United were thinking about maybe sacking Erik Ten Hag. I spoke to a lot of United fans who were saying Emery, they would love him. I spoke to Liverpool fans who were like, we wouldn't mind Unai Emery as charge of them as the manager. I think maybe not elite, but yeah. I think for me that he is elite, and I'm going around in circles here, but I just want to say that despite the fact that he hasn't won, a league title outside of France, which probably gets ridiculed sometimes as being a farmers league, I think he is an elite manager, and I think that what's definitely going to happen with Aston Villa this season, people are going to expect them to drop off. I'll be surprised if they drop off massively. I think they'll still get Europe of some sort next season, and I think it's because not only of the quality of the squad, but I think because of the manager and the quality of their manager, and I think Unai Emery, yeah, he has to be an elite manager. Now then, let's talk about Oliver Glasner, and I'm going to put him there for now and talk about him because I think he's a really, really good manager. I think Palace, have really outdone themselves by getting him to the club, and he's already made a massive impression on English football. And I think it was only 13 games he took charge of Crystal Palace last season, but in that his points per game was 1.85. So if Crystal Palace were to maintain that for the entirety of this upcoming season, they'd end up on 70 points, which would probably give them Champions League football, which is, considering Crystal Palace, the club that they are, where they come from, I think that would be absolutely incredible. I think that would be outstanding. And I think it's a tough one with Glasner because we'll have to see. I mean, this season coming up is going to be massive for him and Palace, and let's see how good he really is for a full season. But, the job he did at Frankfurt, getting them Europa League football as well and winning the Europa League, I think that in itself cannot be understated how massive that is. And the fact that Crystal Palace have got their hands on a manager of his calibre, I think, Bayern Munich apparently wanted him when they were searching for their managers. I think there'll be a couple of Champions League quality sides who, would be jealous of the fact that Palace have him as well. I think obviously he's going to lose Elise this summer. How is he going to replace him? How are they going to play without him? I think when you have a manager of quality, you aren't too worried about the players as long as you have the manager. And I think, I think Crystal Palace won't drop off too much without Elise either, and that thing is a credit to Glasner as well. So where would I put him? Because at the very least, he's a solid Premier League manager. But then I look at the names that he's alongside with Dyche, with Silva, with O'Neill, with Frank, and I just think, do you know what? He is a level above all of them. I don't think that he's quite at the elite level, considering the point salaries that some of these managers have been getting, the trophies that they won in different countries. I think that if he does well with Palace, then there's a chance that we could talking about him in elite one day. But I think for now, just he is a level above the rest. And next, let's maybe talk about the other two newly promoted managers. Let's talk about Russell Martin and let's talk about Kieran McKenna. And let's talk about them together because there are some similarities, but there are also some differences that I want to talk about as well. And of the newly promoted sides, I think Ipswich will end up becoming the talk of the town just because McKenna used to be at the Man United backroom staff. He then went to Ipswich and he got them back-to-back promotions in consecutive years to get them into the Premier League. So there's a little bit more of hype and talk around Ipswich at the moment than there are maybe Southampton and Russell Martin, who have obviously Southampton as a club recently been in the Premier League for a decent part of time during the 2010s. And Russell Martin, who's a bit more of a journeyman, less maybe of a sexy name and an option, but I think both are in very similar boats in the fact that can they be solid Premier League managers? No, absolutely not yet, because they haven't, managed in the Premier League yet, and they're still very young, so there's a chance for them to get there. But I think to be a solid Premier League manager, I think you would have to keep your respective clubs safe from relegation, and then you'd have to continuously keep them safe, and then after accumulation of time, then you would become a solid Premier League manager. At the moment, they're still very young. They've got a chance of being that. But I think at the very least, they need a good season, both of them. So we're going to have to move them down, unfortunately, just one more tier. Is it last chance saloon for them? No, not at all. Because like I said, they're still very young. And we saw what happened with Vincent Kompany and Burnley last season. He had them playing an attractive style of football and he still got them relegated. But despite that, he somehow ended up getting himself the Bayern Munich job. Maybe that has something to do with his pedigree, who he had as his manager at his club level, what he achieved as a player. So maybe that helped him out and elevated him up a little bit higher. But I think for both of them, I think they need a good season, but it's definitely not a last chance saloon for them yet. So I'm going to leave them there for now. Now let's talk about Erik ten Hag, and this is arguably one of the hardest ones because is he elite? No, it just doesn't look right there, and I don't think he can be because I think the other three are all better managers than him. Is he a level above? You can maybe make an argument for it because of the fact that what he did at Ajax was absolutely spectacular, getting them to a semi-final of the Champions League. Arguably probably should have been in the final of that Champions League if it wasn't for arguably one of the biggest upsets in Champions League history. Is he a solid Premier League manager? I'm not sure because of the fact that obviously because of the club that he's at, being a solid Premier League manager, Man United would mean probably consistently top four and being in the cup competitions. He definitely needs a good season. But this is also his last chance saloon because of the fact that he's been given a new 2-year contract, but we've seen he's had one good season, one bad season, and whatever this season, the upcoming season ends up being is going to be the aggregate. So if it's a bad season, I think he's gone. If it's a good season, I think he stays, and the Man United have to give him a long-term contract. So he could really be in any of these four categories, which really makes him a hard one to place. But I think Erik ten Hag, as a Premier League manager, arguably you could say this is his last chance saloon. Because if this season doesn't work out, he's gone. And does he come back to the Premier League? I'm not sure, especially with all the ridicule that he's got over the last 2 years, despite the fact that he has still won a Carabao Cup and an FA Cup. But league performance aside, if Man United don't get top four, what do you do? I have no idea, and it's going to be super interesting to watch Man United this season, and especially the situation around the manager, because obviously he's got less power in terms of recruitment around him now. Obviously, Ineos have brought in the best in class in terms of the hierarchy and the board structure, and I think his job, while safe now, is under scrutiny. So I think I'm going to keep him in last chance saloon, and I'll move him all the way to the front of last chance saloon just so people don't hate me thinking I've got him lower down than Steve Cooper and Espirito Santo. But yeah, Ten Hag, last chance saloon. Man United fans, do you think that's fair? Because yes, he needs a good season, but I don't think you can put him in solid yet. I don't think he's a level above, so I think that's probably fair. Okay, only 5 more to go. Let's talk about West Ham's manager, Julian Lopetegui, who is one of the new managers in the Premier League, only going to start this season now. And again, this is also a very, very hard one, because when you have a manager who has the pedigree of the clubs that he's managed, with the likes of Porto, with like Spain, Real Madrid, Sevilla, Wolves, well, I mean, Wolves obviously not the most sexiest, but Premier League experience, which is vital sometimes. When you look at a manager with that kind of CV, you think to themselves, okay, West Ham have got themselves an elite manager, and yes, they have got themselves a very good manager, but he doesn't have the same kind of aura around him as someone like a Unai Emery, which makes this one quite hard to place. And I like Lopetegui. I am unsure whether West Ham probably should have got rid of David Moyes, but obviously the style of football was an issue. I think for Lopetegui, I mean, obviously, first thing he needs to do is improve the style of football, get West Ham some points, and maybe get them back into the European places, which they've had for, I think, the last 3 or 4 seasons. I'm not sure I can put him in levels above, because he doesn't feel like he is a manager a level above. And maybe I'll be proven wrong. Maybe we'll see how good West Ham can be. But just something's missing. It doesn't feel like he's massively affiliated with any one club. It doesn't feel like any of the previous fan bases love him. They think that maybe he did a good job, but they don't like really resonate with him. And West Ham, I think it's a good club for him at the moment, and Lopetegui is a good manager for West Ham. How's it going to go? I'm not sure. It's a really difficult one. I think for where he is in his own career, he probably wants to be, managing some of the bigger clubs in world football. And I think, with the greatest respect to West Ham, that's not them at the moment. And he probably is using West Ham as a bit of a stepping stone. I think he wants to be a manager who's, levels above, maybe even elite, but something's not quite right. He's not there yet, despite the clubs that he has managed previously. So I'm going to put him in solid Prem manager. And yeah, maybe I'll put him right at the front of solid Prem manager, because I think he, out of all the 5 there in that row, has the ability to go up to the level above and to do it as quickly as possible. So for now, I'm going to put him in solid Prem manager. And then let's talk about Fabian Hurlitzer of Brighton and Hove Albion, another new manager since the end of last season, obviously with Roberto De Zerbi leaving the club. And where do you put him? Because again, hasn't managed a single game in the Premier League. But obviously, when you get appointed as the Brighton manager, yes, you have a lot of trust in the Brighton process. You think to yourself, the managers that they've had previously, like the Potter and De Zerbi, you think to yourself, they've made a good appointment, that they're going to play an attractive style of football, and they're going to be a manager that who's going to take the club in the right direction. However, he does have risks. I mean, he's the youngest Premier League manager ever at 31 years of age. He's never managed or played in the Premier League before, and he's never managed a team in the top flight of any division ever. I mean, obviously, FC St. Pauli were in the German second division, obviously got themselves promoted, but I think from them to Brighton was probably a step too big that he couldn't say no to. So how he's going to play is going to be interesting. How well they're going to do is going to be interesting. I'm really excited to see his side play football next season, because I think he's going to have a very interesting style of football that might catch a lot of teams out. But if it doesn't work, I think that it was also going to look incredibly embarrassing. So I think Brighton will probably end up being fine. He'll probably end up doing a decent job. But where can I put him in this tier list based on what he's done so far in his career? I'm going to put him in needs a good season, because ultimately he does. His first season in English football, there's a lot of pressure on him as a very young manager. Things could go wrong. Yes, we trust Brighton, but it is a risk, and it is a big risk. So I think I'm going to leave him in needs a good season, and I don't feel harsh putting him there, because he's not a solid Premier League manager yet. If you look at all the names above him on that row, they're all established managers, and you know what you're going to expect from each and every one of them. With Fabian Hurlitzer, you don't know that just yet. You expect he's going to do a good job, but you can't be certain. So yeah, needs a good season for me. And then we come on to our final 3, and these 3 I've really, really struggled with, because let's start off with Ange Postecoglou and Spurs. Because 2 seasons ago, Spurs had one of the worst seasons they've ever had in recent years. They started off the season with Antonio Conte playing really bad, really boring football, and then obviously it all fell apart after press conferences and outing themselves and out in the media. Then obviously his number 2, Christian Stellini, takes over. He then ends up staying for a couple of games and leaving, and Ryan Mason takes over, and then he only plays, manages them for 6 or 7 games till the end of the season, trying to get a bit of a feel-good factor back. but they end up ending the season really, really badly. And Ange Postecoglou comes in under not too much pressure and expectation, but does what is perceived to be a really good job because he changes the style of football and he gets them scoring a lot of goals. However, they only got 6 more points last season than they did in that, tragic season 2 years ago. So it's one where there was a lot of positives to take from last season and under Ange Postecoglou. But he's talking a very good game. He's saying about the fact that, anything apart from first is not good enough. We need to be going for number one, and that's a win in the Premier League title. And is he happy with just Champions League football? No. And when you talk a good game, eventually you've got to start backing that up. And I don't think he needs to be backing it up next season because of the fact that, it is Spurs and when was the last time they won a trophy or a Premier League title. But I think he does need to deliver some sort of improvement this season. Is he a solid Premier League manager? Yes, undoubtedly, without, no doubt in my mind whatsoever. Is he a level above? Well, if you look at his career, starting off in Australia, managing the Australian national team, what he did at Yokohama FC in Japan, then going to Celtic, and the way and how dominant they were at Celtic, I think it is fair to say that we're putting Oliver Glasner in a level above. Then we can probably put Ange Postecoglou as well. So yeah, I'm going to put him in level above, and I think that we will see that from him next season or maybe the season after if he's still at Spurs. But yeah, he's definitely going in the right trajectory. And another manager who, again, is very difficult is Andoni Iraola of Bournemouth. Because, yes, at the very minimum, he's a solid Premier League manager. I think, again, no doubt about that whatsoever. Because of the fact that he's got Bournemouth the most points they've ever had in their history, in the top flight division of English football. And I think the style of football that he's playing as well, after especially Gary Neville got sacked, which a lot of people thought was potentially a little bit harsh. Is he a manager who's a level above the rest? I think he's a manager who will be a level above the rest. Is he showing it right now? Is he that level now? I think he could be. I think he could be, if I'm being completely honest. And I'm going to do it as well. I'm going to put Andoni Iraola in level above because there's a couple of clubs in world football who are probably in a more prominent position than Bournemouth. And I think they could do a lot worse than getting Andoni Iraola as a manager. And I think we're going to see that from Bournemouth this season. Maybe a little bit of a spoil from our Premier League predictions. But I think Bournemouth are going to do well. And I'm going to invest in Andoni Iraola because I think he's worth it. And I'm going to put him in level above. And last but not least, Eddie Howe. Let's talk about Eddie Howe and what he's been doing in his career so far. And I think Eddie Howe is a phenomenal manager. And, he'd be one of my picks to be the England manager if it were up to me. And I think the job that he did at Bournemouth, getting them promoted to the Premier League and then also keeping them in the Premier League for 5 consecutive years is an outstanding job. But now we think of Bournemouth as a regular Premier League side. He then obviously took a bit of a time out, obviously went to Newcastle and then taking them from, in the relegation zone to then keeping them comfortably out in the first season he took over. Secondly, then getting them into the Champions League, which was a phenomenal achievement, one that cannot be understated because, no one expected it really. And then, yes, they had a bit of a disappointing season in comparison last year. But, they're still in the 7th, and it wasn't for the fact that United won the FA Cup. They would be in Europe again and probably one of the favourites to win the Conference League if they were to be in it. And I think Eddie Howe is, I think for him, it would be nice if he won a trophy sometime soon. I know you got to the Carabao Cup final, but if he were to win a Carabao Cup or a FA Cup, I think that would really elevate him as well. But I think even without those, then I think, he is a cut above the rest. So I'm also going to put him in a level above. And there we have it. That is the entirety of the tier list. Let me know what you think in the comments below. How well do you think I've done? Have I got everyone right? Have I got everyone wrong? I definitely know with some of my shouts that there's going to be a couple of disagreements at the very least. But as the season goes on, I just really want this as a reference point to come back to and say, this is what I thought at the start of the 24-25 season, and here's what I think now. And yeah, I think there's definitely room for some managers to make, the step up. And I definitely think there's a chance for some managers to make the step down as well. So it'll be an interesting one to watch.